Jeff Petry spoke about how the Panthers culture led him to signing with the team and what's a reasonable extension number for Mackie Samoskevich. All this and more on today's Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, July 4th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at MondoMan12. Follow the show account anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube and on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. Shout out to everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. You can do that all on Game Time. So, Florida Panther fans, grateful to be back here once again on another edition of the show. Here, happy 4th of July to everybody who is celebrating this weekend, and grateful that it's on a Friday. So, a lot of us will have an extended weekend, as after this podcast is posted, I will be heading to the beach to get some relaxation and to get away a little bit after a whole bunch of work here on the show and with what the Panthers have done in free agency. So today we are going to discuss the Panthers defenseman Jeff Petry speaking to the media on what he said about it. We're also going to discuss how another reason why the Panthers made the right decision to run it back based on what they have at their disposal in the present and in the immediate future, and what's a reasonable number for Mackie Samoskevich on his, as he is currently an RFA. So buckle up, we have a jam-packed show to discuss here on the program. So Jeff Petry spoke with the South Florida media over Zoom from his home in Michigan. He's actually from Ann Arbor, Michigan. So he was playing with the Detroit Red Wings for the last couple of years after coming from Pittsburgh and then previously before that, Montreal, which he has made a Stanley Cup final. Unfortunately, him and the Habs lost in 5 games against the Tampa Bay Lightning in that COVID-shortened season in 2021, and trying to put himself in a position once again to get back to the Stanley Cup final and ultimately lift the Stanley Cup as a 37-year-old defenseman. So he spoke about how when the Florida Panthers came calling, that it was a no-brainer. It was a group. Spoke about how what the group did on and off the ice. We discussed so many times about how the Panthers trips to Dairy Queen, or what they do at the poker table with the amount of barking at one another when it comes to trying to, get a little bit of extra cash at the table as well. So that's another thing on just how close this group is. And then Jeff Petry just trying to be a part of it. And also he spoke about how when guys come over to South Florida, it's about not coming here and just being who you are, not trying to be something that you're not. And that's something that's very important. And once again, when it comes to the Panthers and just how up and down in their organization on how it preaches, it really is very welcoming to the new guys. And Jeff Petry, he's more of that offensive defenseman for his career. I mean, when Aaron Ekblad actually went down with injury in 2021, him and Jeff Petry were actually 2 of the goal leaders for defensemen in the NHL at the time of Aaron Ekblad's injury. So crazy to think how that comes together, and to think that Jeff Petry has an opportunity to really play with more defensively minded players as well, to really help his game to a point where he's able to compete in another long playoff run. And once again, the ultimate goal of hoisting the Stanley Cup. He also Jeff Petry also spoke about the family when it came to the fact that he's moving down to South Florida from Michigan, and oldest son. And it's difficult when it comes to young children trying to move schools, and also when it comes to trying to find a place to live, and also the sports that they play. The oldest son was actually discussing how, oh, wow, so it's the winter time and I get to go play baseball outside. That's great. So that's another thing about how lucky players and their families are when it comes to just coming over to South Florida. It's, you go to the rink, it's cold, and then when you go outside, you get the sun. It's a better for recovery. So that's also the big factor when it comes to just when the Florida Panthers finally getting this right after going 25 plus years of this being, to put it lightly, kind of a train wreck organization from what it's become then to what it is right now. And the fact that players want to come here, and the fact that they get to the fact that it's a place where you get sunshine and a great paycheck. It's a great situation for a lot of players coming in. And he spoke about how he's seen how other veteran defensemen like an Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Nate Schmidt, and how much that has helped into his decision. He said that it speaks to the group and how it bringing in a new player and that it fits well. And once again, emphasizing for a second time on trying to be someone that, uh, not trying to pretend that he's someone that he's not. And also, here's the thing that we haven't really spoken about Jeff Petry signing, and then the fact that Nate Schmidt signed with the Utah Mammoth, is that there's right now a little bit of a hole right now in power play too. Yeah, that could be replaced by Gustav Forsling, Uvis Belinskis, or even Aaron Ekblad if you were to shift them down from power play 1 to power play 2. But the fact that Jeff Petry is a puck mover, right-handed shot who can protect the blue line, that is right now looking like the hole that will be filled in the Panthers lineup. So another reason why it's a great signing for an older guy in Jeff Petry who has the long playoff experience, and also the fact that he's seen how other guys have flourished in the last two previous seasons. He has also spoken about some of the players that he's familiar with. He hasn't played with basic really anyone on the current Panthers roster as far as a club perspective, but he has played with Seth Jones in a couple of world championships a couple of times. And then he was on the same team as Dmitry Kulikov in Pittsburgh, but the time was very short about them being on the ice together because Kulikov got hurt shortly after he got there. So they didn't really have time to actually play games together. So that's another thing about how the lack of familiarity there is for Jeff Petry coming into the mix. But the fact that he's taking a personal risk. He wants the Stanley Cup so badly, so it makes his decision a lot easier to come over to the Panthers here. He did also speak about the phone calls and the text message on who is the one who stuck out. Matthew Tkachuk was the one who he mentioned that text him saying about how he hated playing against him and glad to see that he's on the same team. And really, it goes back to what Brad Marchand said during the parade, is like, oh, I'm glad that I don't have to be hit by Sam Bennett anymore. And it's funny because Brad Marchand was saying that quote before anything was actually finalized in a contract. So that's another thing about that situation, about how him manifesting it, them trying to make it work, and even once again Bill Zito saying about how it felt like that they made the decision a long time ago to bring the whole band back together. So another thing about that. And also once again, he spoke about the structure and how it's always a hard team to play against when it comes to structure, talent, and work ethic. It's just a great combination of all the three when it comes to just the amount of buy-in that this group consistently has. And again, once again, for the fact that the Panthers have a good amount of defensive forwards that really truly assists the defensemen. It's not for Jeff Petry that he's going to be stuck in his own end, and the fact that he's going to have guys who are able to help him get the puck out of the zone, especially when it's a top line with Sam Reinhart and Alexander Barkov, who is going to help back check, and also the same thing with the third line, especially with Eetu Luostarinen and Anton Lundell being in that mix. So Jeff Petry is going to have a whole bunch of help around him, and also it's going to really help with puck support. The fact that is, if Dmitry Kulikov goes back to his natural side on the left, you know that with a right-handed shot, if there's a battle in the corner, there's that support if he's in the trapezoid, and that he could quickly get it to him, and then Dmitry Kulikov can skate it just above the goal line and then hit that first breakout pass, and then that they're onto the races on possibly getting something in transition, or even getting a line change if they were to go to the dump and chase game, that's the Florida Panthers' bread and butter there. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to discuss more of the reason why the Panthers made the right decision to run it back, even though it's not the number one factor into why they decided to do it. We'll discuss this and more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. And we've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with killer last minute deals. And some of the event, it's summertime is also the time for baseball and also for concerts. So Game Time has been an app that I have been using and searching to see where my next sporting event or show I end up going to. And thanks to Game Time for that. And take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets and sporting tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And thank you guys once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Friday, July 4th, Independence Day here in the U.S. And I hope everybody north of the border also had a great Canada Day for yourselves. And also some news is that former Panthers defenseman Matt Kiersted has also signed a deal with the Minnesota Wild, so he's no longer part of the organization. Jesse Puljujärvi is back overseas. He's now back in He's finished, but he has signed a deal in a club in Switzerland, excuse me. So he is no longer in the Florida Panthers organization. All the best of luck to Jesse Puljujärvi. But the Panthers did re-sign forward Mackenzie Entwistle to a 2-year, two-way contract, and Entwistle missed a big portion of the season for him. So hopefully that he's back to full health and that he's able to contribute to the Charlotte Checkers this year as they look to defend their Eastern Conference final and to hopefully bring their first Calder Cup championship since 2019. So honestly, I am having so much fun on this podcast as of late, even though there's no games to cover, and seeing how the band is coming back together. And also the fact that I look at Puckpedia and I see how clean, with still a little bit of moves to look at for the Panthers to make, how clean the sheet actually really looks when it comes to how Bill Zito has just calculated everything and put everything together when it comes to just once again putting a winner here in the place we love to call home of South Florida. And when you think about what the Panthers have done, winning these two championships in a row, you don't have to worry about who's going into what specific hole. I mean, think about this: when the Panthers lost Brandon Montour last season, you're thinking, okay, who's going to be filling in the spot up in the lineup? Because we knew that Dmitry Kulikov was only going to be on the second pair temporarily. Now we don't have to worry about that with Aaron Ekblad being re-signed, and Seth Jones could be right back into the second pair role for the Panthers. And it's Kulikov being paired with either an Uvis Balinskis or a Jeff Petry. And in the case of the forward group for the Panthers here, it's okay. Top line, Verhaeghe, Barkov, Reinhart. Third line, Lundell, Luostarinen, Marchand. Fourth line, Nosek, Gadjevich, and Greer. And yes, there's still questions about Matthew Tkachuk, whether he's starting the season. Okay, you have Bennett, and then you have one of Mackie Samoskevich or Jesper Boquist to start, or both if Matthew Tkachuk isn't going to start the season based on a decision that he still has to make based on his surgery. I mean, yeah, bringing the whole band back together makes, for me, summer content a little bit more difficult to create because but it also is going to be really helpful for my creative muscles when it comes to that. But the fact is that Florida Panther fans can enjoy their summer. Bill Zito can enjoy his summer. Just sit back, relax, sip on a couple of drinks, and say, oh, I got everything that he could be proud of the job that he did. And the fact is that he has made South Florida adore him as well and adore this team, which it's the hottest ticket in South Florida, which that's why another reason why you keep it back together, which you have it's funny because when Bill Zito spoke to the media a few days ago after free agency, he spoke about how he and the Miami Dolphins management is consistently in communication for how they manage things. He actually says that he is, in fact, a Dolphins fan. So the thing is for Zito and building this, it's once again all the work that he's done as far as trying to take risk and taking those reasonable ones. What you think about it, 2022 to 2028, all the first round picks that they have shipped off in order to bring guys to help them win, only two of those guys are guys that the Panthers were unable to re-sign. Claude Giroux and Ben Sherratt, which came in the same deadline, which the Panthers were coming up with $6 million in buyout money coming on their books. They only were able to offer Claude Giroux a $1 million deal, which he ended up signing with the Ottawa Senators for just over $6 million. And now he actually re-signed with them after his 3-year deal is over. So that's another thing about how not only has Bill Zito traded picks, but he's been able to retain his talent that he's acquired, which I thought that Brad Marchand was a rental this whole time when he put in a conditional second, which ended up being a first, which next year's pick will be the Chicago Blackhawks pick that the Panthers sent over with Seth Jones. And then 2027 will be the Boston Bruins picking in the first round, thanks to the Panthers there. But here's another reason why the Panthers made the right decision as far as bringing the band back together. It's because of the lack of assets that they had. And here's the thing, another credit to Bill Zito on, yeah, we talk about the first round picks, but what about what they've done with second and third round picks? Because think about 2 second round picks that Bill Zito has traded to get Sam Bennett into the mix. A second round pick that wasn't that was a future pick, and then Emil Heineman traded to Calgary, which Emil Heineman has already been traded 2 more times. One for Tyler Toffoli, and then the other one in the Noah Dobson deal that brought Noah Dobson from Long Island to Montreal. So now Montreal has taken a little bit of a step now in their build after making the playoffs just last year before losing to the Washington Capitals. They're trying to compete with the Florida Panthers, which, hey, it only gets harder and harder to try to win a Stanley Cup again. And also Vladimir Tarasenko and Brandon Montour. Brandon Montour was traded for a 3rd round pick. Vladimir Tarasenko was traded for 2 3rd round picks. Well, a 3rd and a 4th originally, but it was a conditional 4th that ended up being a 3rd. So just once again, great asset management that Bill Zito did in the past. And it's going to have to continue with some creativity in the future. But it's going to depend on the Panthers and their future cap space as well. If they were to make moves at the deadline, which chances are the Panthers are not only going to run it back at the start of the season, but maybe might have to run it back at the deadline because of the fact that they probably won't be able to accrue cap space throughout the year with Tkachuk on LTIR. So something to consider there. But looking at the Panthers and their picks that they have, 2 second round picks in 2026. One of them was acquired in the Justin Sourdif trade. No 3rd round pick in 2020 in 2026 as well. That was traded. That was the Vladimir Tarasenko trade. So a 4th, a 5th, and a 6th, but no 7th round pick. They traded up in this year's draft. So they sacrificed this year's pick, next year's 7th round pick with Chicago. No 1st round pick in 2027, but they have a pick in every single round from 2 to 7, including 2 in round 6 and 2 in round 7. And they have every single pick from 1 to 7 in 2028. So the creativity that that this front office is going to have to do, maybe not even this year, but the year after, it's going to be interesting to see. Because think about this: in order to and for what Bill Zito did is what he was able to do with the later round picks and even to clear some cap space. Because remember, Dale Talent signed Anton Stroman to the Panthers in 2020. played a big role when Aaron Ekblad went down after they lost in 6 games to the Tampa Bay Lightning. But that was space that the Panthers needed to clear with an aging defenseman. Yeah, Strawman is a Stanley Cup champion at the time, but that he wasn't going to help that version of the Panthers get to that next step. So he uses a second-round pick to add on, along with a prospect at the time, Vladislav Kolyachonok, in order to clear that space. But things are a little cleaner now, and the future, it feels, it's objects in the mirror are closer than they appear, is that saying on a mirror, and when you're looking at your vehicle, and seeing that the Panthers have a good amount of future picks a lot closer than what they did in past years, it's going to make things a lot easier to manage when it comes to just throwing something out there, when it comes to trying to just add on. And the fact that the work is already done, it's not the point where Bill Zito needs to take a higher risk, because he's already has, and those risks can come a little bit later, when the cap does go up and you have a little bit more space. Yeah, the cap will go up by not a total of 9 million this year, but I don't know if that's enough to make a big move as soon as next season. But maybe when it does in 2027, which is scheduled to be 113 million, that's when the Panthers could possibly pounce there, as far as bringing in another guy into the mix and not having the other team retaining as much salary, because of the fact that the Panthers do have their core locked up for so long. And the thing is, Sam Bennett, Aaron Ekblad, and Brad Marchand took up 21% of the cap in 2025. This year coming in, because of the deals that Marchand and Ekblad took, their percentage of the cap is 20.57%, less than the year before, and the cap is going up 18% around there in 2026 and 17% the year after. So once again, impressive work. And the fact is that Bill Zito, with the lack of assets that he has, and he could use some of those to get more depth players on expiring deals coming up in the future. So that's another thing about just the amount of work that he's done in order to get to this point. So another reason why the Panthers made the right decision in order to run it back, because of what their futures look like as far as assets. But there is still one deal for the Panthers to get done, one major deal, and that is RFA Mackie Samoskevich, which the Panthers only have a few dollars to spare when it comes to giving him a deal. But what's a reasonable number for the current state of the Panthers, and a respectable number for Mackie in the future? We'll discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Segment 3 here on this Friday, July 4th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Friday. So, Mackie Samoskevich played 72 games, almost scored 20. Great hands, great speed. Not really matured yet in his body, but has a whole bunch of time to get to that place where he's fully mature and going into his prime. Which starting off the playoffs, he really started off with a bang, battling along the boards after the Panthers were getting the puck in from one end to the other. He beats out an icing, gets around Victor Hedman, battles along the half wall, and then dishes it to Sam Bennett for a redirection goal. And the Panthers start off that game 1 in Tampa Bay with a bang, which they scored 6 goals in that one. But we've seen strides from starting off on the 4th line to going to the 2nd line. And there's a point where he was demoted due to losing a battle. I remember it was against the New York Rangers in October, where losing a battle against Adam Fox, and the puck ends up in the back of the net. But Mackie Samoskevich being on the 4th line a few days later he actually got his first goal of the season on the wraparound. Remember, do you guys remember what that line was that he had? It was him, Patrick Giles, and Uvis Belinskis. Yes, Uvis Belinskis. Remember, he was playing forward at the time for the Panthers there during that time, as they were kind of struggling with injuries to start the season. Remember, Barkov and Matthew Tkachuk were banged up to start the season. So guys had to step up in different parts of the lineup. But Mackie Samoskevich also dealt with an injury, was out for a bit when the new year started. Came back against St. Louis, scored a goal, and then was injured in the same game, only to get hurt again. But the Panthers did have the Four Nations break in order to help them get him healthy and him not miss a lot of time. And also remember, Mackie was also part of a paper transaction that had him sent down to the AHL because of the fact that Sergei Bobrovsky had to stay behind due to the birth of his second child, and they had to call up a goaltender. And Mackie was the only player on the roster who was waivers exempt, so they had to send him down. The Panthers played those games in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Spencer Knight started those games, and it's a little bit of a tough situation right there, because you want to be in the lineup so badly, but you understand because of the fact of the numbers game that it comes to when it comes to the cap and everything. But all in all, still played a whole bunch of games, 72 for the Panthers, and was really shown a sign of growth after scoring 20 in Charlotte last season. And remember, he was part of the taxi squad. He was in 3 different postseasons and one in Michigan with the Calder Cup playoffs and the Panthers' first appearance in the Stanley Cup final, even though he was he was a black ace for the Panthers there. And here's the thing. A few days ago, we were talking about with Jim Behringer about how a Mackie Samoskevich trade isn't necessarily off the table, depending on what they have to do in order to fit the puzzle pieces together. But after seeing the Tarasov contract at 1.05, bringing Tomas Nosek in for the same exact rate of the previous season, now things are starting to make sense as far as how the Panthers could possibly start off the season, which if they delay trading Evan Rodriguez, which we had a full episode discussing that yesterday, they could still start 23 players and be up to $4.15 million over the cap. And why do I say $4.15 million over the cap? Because I feel that the most the Panthers could give Mackie Samoskevich as far as what the cap hit will be for this year has to be $1.2 million. So stay with me here. Matthew Tkachuk scheduled probably to be on long-term injured reserve to start the season. That opens up his cap space. Again, the Panthers can't be extremely too much over the cap, because they're going to have to find a way to reactivate him, because he'll want to be in the lineup and get some games in before the Olympics in February. So 1.2 would be the sweet spot. So let's just assume that Matthew Tkachuk does start the year. Evan Rodriguez gets traded. It creates $50K in cap space. And then you give Mackie Samoskevich a $1.2 million deal. That would be at $1.15 million in cap space with 22 players on the roster. So why the 1.15 over the cap? Because in the case that you have to waive Jesper Boquist, because let's also consider this. Mackie is no longer waivers exempt, and the Panthers are not going to take a chance to put him on waivers in order for another team to claim him. So who is going to be the sacrificial lamb for the Panthers? More than likely, it's probably going to be Jesper Boquist. So Jesper Boquist is making $1.5 million this year. That is what his cap hit is for the Florida Panthers here. When a player is placed on waivers, a little reminder, only 1.15 of his cap hit goes off the books if they're sent down to Charlotte. The Spencer Knight was waivers exempt in 2024 when the Panthers won the cup the first time. He was paid $4.5 million. And when the Panthers won the Cup the first time, 3.35 of Spencer Knight's contract was still on the books throughout the season. So what makes sense for the Panthers to give Mackie is that number of 1.2. It's still giving him a raise of $300K. It's still giving him a little bit of respect, saying that that the Panthers want him to grow. But here's the thing also of how the Panthers could do right by him. And this is probably what his representatives will probably want. His representatives will probably want a 1-year deal, which it still works out for the Panthers in this way because Mackie will not be a UFA until 2030. So Bill Zito will want to try to negotiate with his agent, who Mackie Samoskevich's agent is the same agent that represents Cale Makar and Brock Faber. So 2 high-paying guys. Also, Mackie's agent is also the same agent as Mike Benning, and Mike Benning is also trying to get a new contract as well. And he is, thankfully, Mike Benning is not eligible for an offer sheet. Neither is Mackie Samoskevich. So Mackie Samoskevich is going to be a Panther unless there's a trade that blows the Panthers' socks off. So Mackie is a UFA in 2030. The best situation that the Panthers could do for themselves in the current and to respect Mackie as a player who has tremendous upside. His ceiling is 30 goals around there, in my opinion, is to do the 1-year deal this year, 1.2. And if/when they are to waive Jesper Boquist, and if he goes unclaimed, which if he is claimed, hey, you'll get $35K in cap space, and that is some to start accruing as they get to the trade deadline. So if he gets claimed, we wish Jesper Boquist all nothing but the best. If he doesn't, the Panthers will be exactly at 0 with 21 players when Matthew Tkachuk gets reactivated. So Bill Zito can calculate this perfectly while still respecting Mackie Samoskevich. But for Mackie, after the deal is over, the 1-year deal, he'll still be an RFA. The Panthers would probably want to bridge him after that. 3 more years that would take him to 2029, and he'll still be an RFA after this 1-year deal. And that is when you could evaluate what the next steps are going to be. You're a year before you have to make difficult decisions on guys whose clauses change. Anton Lundell will need a new deal, that he is going to get a significant raise. Sasha Barkov is going to be a little older. Matthew Tkachuk will be in his early 30s. What are the decisions then? And Mackie Samoskevich could really be, as Mackie will be entering his prime as that new wave. This could be a Florida Panthers in transition from the 2020s to the 2030s that could be built around Anton Lundell and Mackie Samoskevich. And yeah, the Barkov and Tkachuk will be past their primes, but chances are that you could still honor those guys with around the same salary that they're making. I mean, look at the LA Kings and Anze Kopitar. His game has aged like fine wine, even though he's in his late 30s. So as long as Barkov has the this defensive prowess that he does, his game is still going to age well even after 2030. And the Panthers are possibly going to be able to still keep him around at a cap hit that's not detrimental, that's not going to hurt their future when they enter into the 2030s and are going to have to be in a little bit of retool as well. But you give yourself an opportunity with Mackie Samoskevich, a 1-year deal, and then the 3-year bridge deal gives them an opportunity to transition into that new age of Florida Panthers hockey as they go into that new era. But the work to do that starts in this current free agency period on what you do. But Mackie and his representatives have to understand that 1.2, that specific number, is the most that they're going to do there. Because if you were to even raise it by 0.35 there, you're going to have to jettison another player off the roster, and the Panthers will have to be up to 20 players, and that's not a position that they want to be. So 1.2 is that number for Mackie Samoskevich in order to still get the Panthers to being cap compliant when things do settle with the possible Kachuk surgery and LTIR status and a possible Evan Rodriguez trade. But that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. We will be back either Monday or Tuesday from the 4th of July weekend to continue the discussion of the Florida Panthers offseason, as the Panthers are going into another summer once again as the champions and who knows what kind of breaking news that we will get once the weekend is over. So stay tuned, subscribe, and everything, because the conversation doesn't stop when it comes to these Florida Panthers. And the Locked On Podcast Network is the only network that has every team from every sport every single day. So make sure to come back here as we will continue the conversation about the back-to-back Stanley Cup champions. But in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast and be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows in the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steve Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.